Uncle Trump has one shot, one opportunity to stop the death of America. One moment with the freedom of interest, but with DC wit, yo. Vivek's palms are sweaty, his next big job gets heavy. There's curry on his sweater already, mom's tandoori. He's nervous, but DOD is getting order ready to drop bombs, cause he gon' got the fat with Betty. He goes down, DC crowd cries so loud. He opens his mouth, the words you find just come out. They choking now, we the people joking now. The clock's run out, time's up, over, bow. Snap back, DOGE, Elon, they spin gravity. Oh, grab your up with your choke, he's so ready. No boast, make it look easy. No, he works at it, he knows he'll push him in. Gotta keep him alive. Stand together, start World War III, make America great again.
Welcome, conversationalists from across the fruited plain. This is the MAGA Kingdom Report for May 19th, 2025. This is our 19th show. My name is Frank Scavo. I'm here with my co-host Anastasia Theodoropoulos and Dr. Richard Panzer. We continue to show you the failure of the United States government and the New World Order since Donald Trump has taken office. And today we're going to go over NPR reports on double-blind placebos. RFK Jr. orders all new vaccines to undergo placebo trials. RFK Jr. reports on pediatric vaccine bonus program. Australia pushes for honest and open research. What Fauci and the WHO delivered to Vietnam. RFK Jr. reports on MMR vaccine and aborted fetus DNA. COVID mandates were made easy. Half of COVID deaths. Dr. Larry Palevsky reports on vaccines and chronic illness. Pediatrician Dr. Larry Palevsky again challenges the CDC and lowering the bar on childhood development. And the scripture of the week. And then, as usual, we close it out with a music video, Sad Little Man by 5 Times August. So, guys, this is really the MAHA report because, you know, NPR is saying double-blind placebos, which we thought was part of every single vaccine in these United States. But apparently, NPR reports it's not.
Look, Frank, we all should be worried.
I am.
Because National Public Radio is saying that RFK Jr. wants to test vaccines not against other vaccines, but against inert, placebos.
Placebos.
Like saline, that do nothing.
Like we've always believed they were doing, but now we know they weren't doing.
I still want to defund
And actually,
NPR.
the definition of a double-blind placebo actually is taking what you're studying against something that is innately nothing, which is the patient doesn't know. They're getting liquid, water, saline.
Okay, let me share the scary news from National Public Radio, which was not a source of true information during the COVID lockdowns. I'll just put that.
And funded by the leftist organizations.
Which
and I believe it's just been defunded.
USAID.
But
thank you.
This is another reason. Let me just read. Okay. The Trump administration plans to impose a new testing requirement for new vaccines, a demand that could delay the availability of the next round of COVID-19 vaccines, thank God, and complicate the approval of other vaccines. The administration will require all new vaccines to be tested against an inert substance known as a placebo before they can be made available, which is a radical departure from past practices, according to Andrew Nixon, a spokesman for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Secretary of Health and Human Services. The latest statement triggered alarm among vaccine experts that this may be another step by Kennedy to undermine the confidence in and the availability of vaccines.
It's called accountability.
Experts.
This is why Kennedy got in, and no
amazing.
harm. When vaccines first came out and Big Pharma, you were required to do studies, including double-blind placebos,
Right.
in order to ensure that you did not hurt someone, and you had to also follow through, typically about 5 years, okay, to be able to study and make sure there were no long-term side effects.
Well, you're interfering with the business plan. All right.
People be damned.
Now, according to Dr. Paul Offit, a University of Pennsylvania vaccine expert, he's referring to Robert F. Kennedy, and he says that Robert F. Kennedy is an anti-vaccine activist,
Liars.
a science denialist,
Lies.
who's going to do everything he can to tear down the infrastructure in this country of vaccines. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is a dangerous man. You know, our entire business plan is really in danger, and we don't want that happening.
Because we can expose it. Well, you know, figures NPR would print that and broadcast that because it's the lying, racketeering, collusional, conspiratorial media narrative. And Robert F. Kennedy is not anti-vax, but what he is safe-vax. So, yeah, defund NPR and defund those vaccines. Till we straighten
This
it
is
out.
shameful.
Yeah.
Well, you have doctors who have done research in the past, who have had good names, and they had to choose a side. And unfortunately, lobbyists have a lot to do with this. And you have a pharmaceutical industry that pays a lot of money, makes the most money in the world, and they will pursue. So now what happened, and we saw it very clearly during COVID, we saw medical practitioners, okay, who had to decide. Do I toe the line and follow these regulations, or do I become an outsider who loses their license? And that's where we had our doctors who were without borders, and they started doing these things because they believed. Yes. So it clearly identified, because there's good and evil in every industry, and that all of that through COVID, I believe, absolutely disclosed everything.
Yeah, really broke it open.
Right.
So you really have to know what you're looking at.
Look, the good thing about this NPR story is that it shows absolutely, without doubt, why we should defund. The American public should not be paying for this propaganda.
Yep, that's it.
So, well, I'm glad you brought up the NPR, because this is why they're shaking in their boots, folks. Because here is the breaking news. RFK is following through, just like President Trump wanted, and he has ordered all new vaccines to undergo true inert placebo safety trials. So now we have Big Pharma that will no longer be able to hide the harms of vaccines. And guess what? Anthony Fauci, what did he state last year? You'll love this one. We don't do true placebo trials, because he was pressed on this, on vaccines, and never will. Can you imagine him saying that? Yes, he did. So, true placebos, as we were talking, we alluded to earlier, is saline as the comparative in a vaccine control trial. That's not what the government has been using. We'll show the clip and we'll have some more discussion about it, because people really need to know how disgusting.
Become an expert after watching this.
Yes,
Because
and
it's a
decide for
simple lie
yourself.
and the simple truth.
Let's take a look.
If you have something dangerous and it's in the shots to do some job like activate your immune system so that it reacts to the core ingredient of the shot, if it's dangerous, but it's in the control and the shot that's being tested, let's say it kills 1 in 100 people. This is an extreme case, but let's just say that the adjuvant were to kill 1 in 100 people. Well, if the adjuvant is in both the control and the treatment group, then what the experiment will show is that there was no increased tendency towards death if you got the shot, because the harm was also done to the control group. So that is one way of hiding harm. The second way to hide harm is for pharma always tries to hit this target where something that it is testing against a quote-unquote placebo, which isn't one, is so good that it becomes immoral not to give it to the control group. And so what they do is they rush to vaccinate the control group, thereby stopping the capacity to see what the long-term effect of the thing that you were testing is on that population, because you have no one to compare it to.
Yeah.
Right? Because everybody's now had it.
You know, I have to admit that I was totally uninformed about
Right,
this issue.
exactly.
I just assumed that they would
Placebo.
test vaccines given to every single child in America who goes to public school. I just assumed that they were doing a
The
true
right thing.
randomized control group trials, and but you've been involved with this, Anastasia, right?
Yes, so I will tell you this much. We spoke about a new 6-in-1 children's vaccine, Vaxelis,
Wow.
okay, at our
Right.
last episode.
Oh my God.
And guess what? Their placebo was that they used. It was filled with DTaP, polio, HIV, and Hep B vaccines.
So say it again. That was the
placebo.
placebo. But it's the same as the vax. So, right when it happens, this is
Well, they could clearly state that there were no
There were
side
no
effects
effects
because
in
they were
the
both
control group.
suffering from the
Right,
same
equally.
things.
Right.
You can't
what a
make
bunch
this
of
up.
lies.
It is.
But that gentleman said 1 in 100. If you produced a car, or you were an airline that you killed 1 in 100 passengers, what would happen?
Well, he said that's
An
extreme
example. But
extreme.
I think it goes again to the lying, conspiratorial, racketeering, collusional media, because what do they report on? All the negative reports are on the people they don't like, but the vax industry, right? When's the last time they did an expose on the vax industry? They still haven't. And Robert F. Kennedy is now MAHA. He's the head. And what? Now they're attacking him. 98% negative reporting on Robert F. Kennedy.
Really?
So
Yes,
our
98%.
HHS Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., has now unleashed all this. So if you see the list of the placebo testing that they've done with these vaccines, and I'm just going to mention a couple right now that are very fascinating. So for example, what did they test? The influenza A clinical trial with well, guess what? The placebo was influenza B vaccine.
Let me just
Okay.
say this.
So
the hepatitis B only comes from intravenous drug use, and that a child is never going to be
and
exposed to
sex,
Hep
and
B.
sex.
Well, here's the kicker.
Right.
The 2-year-old may be
two-year-old.
having sex, they...
Stop! Yes.
Okay.
It's crazy. What? Right? It's
Or
not
shooting
happening.
up. Those 2-year-olds. Okay.
There's other things at play here. NWO, world order, whatever's going on. Why are Americans being subject to this?
Well, here's the other thing. They tested hepatitis B with hepatitis A. You can't make this up. They reverse it. And what's even worse is, with hepatitis B, with the clinical trial, the placebo was a lumen adjuvant and was only tested for guess how long?
How long?
Okay,
2
because
weeks?
usually it's supposed to be 5 years. You want to do long test studies, right? 5 days. 5 days.
Okay.
And why 5? Not
5
6?
days.
Guess what? A lot of side effects come
Day at
around
6?
the 1 week point.
Oh, really?
5
7
days.
days.
Gee, you wouldn't know
What a
though. It's
bunch of-
working really well.
My
Okay,
God.
you got to protect the business plan. Remember that.
It must
Yes.
be. But when all your customers are dead or disabled, right?
Well, here's another one. We hear about shingles.
That's Bill Gates. That's the depopulation model.
We hear about the shingles vaccine.
Right, right.
Guess what the placebo was for the shingles?
What?
Okay, it was diluted shingles vaccine.
I got that vax.
Okay.
Don't tell me about
Oh, Frank, we love you.
I saw the
We're rooting
commercials.
for you.
This was before Donald Trump and
I did too, by
The
the, way. You're
pandemic.
not the only one, so, all right.
I'm praying for everyone.
well, Rich. Rich is starting to look a little funny.
Okay.
So let's take a look at what's coming up next with RFK, because you're right, he's
Oh my
at the
God.
pinnacle of everything
Uh-huh.
right now.
Exactly.
And why, you have to ask yourself,
Right.
why is it that our kids are being put through all this? And it really has to do with trusting your pediatricians.
Right, right.
But what is going on with the pediatricians that we do not know about? Something's going on. Let's take a look at this.
Part of the responsibility of being a parent is, unfortunately, is to not trust everything your doctor says and to understand that the medical that doctors have been co-opted by the medical cartel, that the medical schools are now run by pharmaceutical companies, they're funded by them, and that the doctors believe mainly what they're doing. They're also heavily compensated. A typical pediatrician's office makes about 50% of its funding comes from vaccines, not actually from selling the individual vaccines, from the traffic. I mean, when I was a kid, I went to the doctor when I needed stitches, and that's it. And today, every kid goes to the doctor at least 10 times to get their vaccines, and that foot traffic in and out of the office is a major part of the business plan for the pediatrician office. And they're also then rewarded by Blue Cross Blue Shield, which has a reward schedule for pediatricians who vaccinate 80 or 85% of the kids in their office. Get these giant bonuses, I think $40 or $400 per kid, huge amounts of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars that they make, making sure that 85% of the kids are vaccinated. And that's why they throw you out of the office if you fight back. It's not because they care so much about your particular kid, it's that you'll throw off the metrics and you'll lose them their bonuses. And so and those schedules have now been published, so people can actually go look at the Blue Cross Blue Shield schedule, and you can see what your pediatrician is making, and it's huge amounts of money from complying. And so, they have these perverse incentives that make it so that they're not really treating your kid as an individual patient. And so your job in a democracy, in today's democracy, is to do your own research. And that's hard to do, but you need to do it to protect your child.
I'm literally speechless, by the way. I just can't, look, I've always had the highest respect for medical doctors and pediatricians who take care of children, and to realize that there's this sort of financial incentive that almost forces them to push these vaccines, which, as we have seen, are not tested properly.
Well, the word is implicit trust, right? You
Right.
had no reason to doubt the doctor because he's in business to keep you well
Right.
until he's what? Rewarded by the pharmaceutical companies and the healthcare industry.
Right.
So this all makes sense. So
Starting
in
to.
New York, as soon as there were issues with the religious exemption, there were a lot of children who were injured. We would have these groups, meeting and discussing what pediatrician do you have that's accepting your children, and the stories of how many families were thrown out, even at just saying, I think I want to delay.
Really?
And they were thrown out. They said, if you
Yeah, you
delay,
can't dissent.
you're no longer a patient.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how many families this happened to, and is happening today because of these incentives. So our pediatricians or certain doctors, and there's a lot of really good ones out there too, but are they being manipulated and serving now their economic financial status, or are they really there to protect the lives, especially of our innocent children?
Question it.
Yeah, so, we know that there were countries that were mandated, particularly with COVID, 110%, 100%, I should say, but it felt like 110, I'm sure. And one of those countries was Australia. So we do have a report here where they're pushing, and this is really good news because it's about transparency and accountability, which is pushing for honest and open research in order to be healthy and safe again. So let's take a look.
Let me get back to hepatitis B. Not only is hepatitis B a sexually transmitted disease or shared by heroin users, so there's no reason a day one old baby should have to get it, let me show you. I got it blown up for myself so I could actually read it. You can go to FDA approved vaccines, just Google it, and every single vaccine in our program pops up. This is how easy your investigation can begin. if you decide to be brave enough to do the investigation. And then click on whatever vaccine on the childhood schedule you're curious about, and then open up the vaccine insert. 6.1 insert. 6.1 every single time. This is how this works. At 6.1, the clinical trial experience is written down. This is what they are telling you they did to prove the safety of a vaccine. There's only one way to prove safety, by the way. You have to have a safety baseline. In high school, you should have learned about the double-blind placebo trial. You have to have one group getting the product and one group getting a placebo that doesn't affect the human body in any way. And then we have them both. We track them, usually for years when it comes to cancer drugs. And it doesn't matter if you're dying of cancer. We're not going to let you trial that drug until we've proven it safe. Years we follow them. How long did we follow the hepatitis B vaccine trial group? It says right here, 6.1 clinical trials. In 3 clinical studies, 434 doses of Recombavax HB, you can look that one up, 5 micrograms were administered to 147 healthy infants and children up to 10 years of age, who were monitored for 5 days after each dose. Injection site reactions and systemic adverse reaction were reported 5 days. A 5-day safety trial with no placebo group. Look it up, it's there. Not misinformation, written by the drug manufacturer. I could do this with every single vaccine. Because of Donald Trump, we had a meeting at the NIH that I went to with Robert Kennedy Jr. when he was first president. And we said, why in all of these can we not find a single placebo trial of any of the childhood vaccines? Are you not doing placebo trials and establishing safety the way every other drug is established? Or are you just not publishing those trials? There was silence in the room, and finally Tony Fauci admitted, we don't do placebo trials on vaccines because it would be unethical. Unethical. For a vaccine like Gardasil, the first time they were going to try and deal with cancer, the vaccine, they had a belief that it was safe because they never did a proper placebo trial to test if it was. We just had an RSV vaccine just a couple of months ago, by the way, that finally had a saline placebo trial, and they stopped it because babies were getting sick, and it was clear that the vaccine was hurting children. Is that just because it was the first placebo-based trial we'd ever seen in a childhood vaccine? And let me say this unequivocally, if I ever see you write in your paper that the experts say a placebo trial was done, then you better print it in that article, and I've said that to all of you. And send it to me and Robert Kennedy Jr., because at the NIH, Tony Fauci and Francis Collins admitted we don't do them. So what does that mean? What does that mean for the safety of our babies and our children? A day 1 old baby is getting a product that we only cared to test for 5 days. Does a healthy child not deserve better than that? Because a cancer patient does. Our grandparents get products that are against placebo for years. Why are our babies not mattering? And by the way, America has the highest rate of first-day baby deaths in the industrialized world, reported by CBS. Is that caused by hepatitis B? I don't know. Is it caused by bad hospitals? Are we a third world nation? Do we not know how to treat a day 1 old baby? Robert Kennedy Jr. is about to start having investigations into these horrible stats.
Okay, so just to clarify, this was United Voice Australia Facebook page, and they showed a video
Del Bigtree
speaking in America about make America healthy again. So just to clarify that.
And that person was?
Del Bigtree. And Del Bigtree is one of the forefront people for accountability who's worked for years. We've worked with him in New York, with Bobby, with RFK Jr., and many other great doctors and scientists. And they actually had some of the first research that was published a few years back on actual studies of the vaccines and long-term accountability, and no one would really look at them. So now that's all changing, which is great news. You know what you're dealing with.
Shocking to me is that Anthony Fauci and Francis Collins went along with this scam. I would call it a scam.
Highly paid. They make $400,000 a year.
And we just, I have to admit, I was totally ignorant about this issue until now.
Well, my question is,
A lot of people.
who goes to jail? Am I the only guy that goes to jail? Because what they did, right? The guy says, here's your published study 6.1, which means that the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, NIH, National Institutes of Health, and those bureaucracies with 20,000 plus people, nobody bothers to read the first sentence in the 6.1, which is on every vaccine, that says how the tests were conducted. What? Who goes to jail? That is I've never seen that before. That's amazing. They lied to the entire world, because vaccines are distributed internationally across the world. And what? They're not doing placebos, and it's on babies. And at 5 days, they cut it. What? How can you respond to that video?
So it's interesting that our Justice Department is now really looking into the pardons. Because as we know, as we recall from Biden on the last day of his presidency, he signed a blanket pardon with years.
For Fauci.
But for Fauci. So this was the first time in history. It wasn't just the auto pen.
Probably
But
Biden
it was the
didn't
first
sign
time
it.
in history that a president provided a blanket pardon without any
Before.
guilty verdicts. So how do we even allow this? So our Justice Department is working on this. Let's not be surprised. Heads will roll. It's still early. It's still early.
True.
But now that we're talking about Fauci and the WHO,
Okay.
we really need to recognize what's going on, because we hear stories all the time from other countries. People who've come here and immigrated here legally, telling us things that almost seem fictitious, because you can't make this stuff up. So, and one of these countries happens to be Vietnam. Let's take a look at that.
We need to wake up. Medical doctors need to wake up. Going back to Vietnam, Vietnam doesn't have anything. There's no such thing as autism in 1975, in year 2000, year 2001. There's no such thing. When Vietnam signed the WHO, when Vietnam signed into the International Monetary Fund, the banking system, Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation introduced the vaccination program into Vietnam. Now Vietnam has over a 300% rise in autism.
So Bill Gates, and we hear about his vaccine programs, right?
Yeah,
They
bad.
went to all these countries, third world countries,
To help.
supposedly to help. And then you have like this doctor here from Vietnam, and he is in a lot of the movies actually, because he's a huge whistleblower, because he couldn't believe what he was seeing and the changes that occurred when you have international organizations like the WHO and the Bill Gates Foundation to come in and absolutely destroy lives. Right.
Well, when you look, the data's piling up now. That's what he's saying. In 1975 in Vietnam, in 2001, look, this didn't exist. The data's piling up, but it all leads back to the 6.1 explanation of how they test. And guess what? They didn't test it, but you now see it in real life. Damage to lives, right? Autism, you never recover from autism. It's a lifelong affliction that most likely could have been avoided.
Look, okay, the real issue, in my opinion, is depopulation. Okay, Bill Gates, his father was one of the founding
crazy
board members of Planned Parenthood.
Margaret Sanger, right.
There are people who believe that the world population should be reduced by 85%. If you look at the COVID vaccines, the studies in Canada, for instance, show a 20% increase in miscarriages among women who are vaccinated. 20%, that's 1 in 5 pregnant women in Canada.
That's a lot.
Didn't deliver the baby that they should have. there's a study in Holland where the sperm count, the healthy sperm count among young men is also about 20% decreased.
Depopulation.
So
That's it.
I'm actually really glad that you brought up Richard, Planned Parenthood, because there seems to be correlations that are coming up to light.
Right.
And one of them is brought up again by our HHS Secretary, Mr. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
MAGA.
And this has to do with the MMR vaccine. And I will tell you, being in New York for many years, they called us crazy for saying that we did not want vaccines with aborted fetal
Right.
DNA.
MMR is measles,
Mumps and
rubella. Okay.
And we were called crazy because why the hell would anybody want to put aborted fetal cells
why?
in a
Exactly.
vaccine? And guess what, folks? We weren't crazy because here are the receipts. So not only does the MMR vaccine contain aborted fetal debris, but it also includes the DNA particles. And guess where it's coming from? It's
Yeah,
coming
aborted
from
fetuses of
Planned
Planned
Parenthood
Parenthood.
and the correlations between the Democratic Party, who are hell-bent on pushing abortions and pushing
Depopulation. Yeah.
vaccines. And where's it all headed? Exactly to where these elitist globalists want, which
Less
is
of us.
That's right. Let's take a look.
There are populations in our country, like the Mennonites in Texas, who are most afflicted, and they have religious objections to the
Right.
vaccination because the MMR vaccine contains a lot of aborted fetus debris and DNA particles. So they don't want to take it. So we ought to be able to take care of those populations when they get sick. And that's one of the things that CDC has not done. CDC has said the only thing that we have is vaccination. There's all kinds of treatments when people do get sick, and those people should be treated with compassion. I'll say, and we ought to have good treatments for them, and that's what we're developing at CDC right now, protocols for treating measles. I want to say this. We've had 4 measles deaths in this country in 20 years. We have 100,000 autism cases a year. We have 38% of our kids now are diabetic or pre-diabetic. That should be in the headlines. When I was a kid, the average pediatrician saw 1 case of diabetes in a 40 or 50-year career. Today, 1 out of every 3 kids who walks through his office door is diabetic or pre-diabetic. That should be getting the headlines. When I was a kid...
You know, no wonder the media is so far against Robert Kennedy and the MAGA. Like, what he's telling you is just, it's all true. This is crazy.
Okay, but then you have to look at the ad revenue that media gets from the pharma companies. I did offer to sing for you the Ozempic jingle.
Ozempic, oh, right.
I've heard it so many times.
Don't sing it at me, Richard.
Well, you know what? Here, case in point, my daughter goes over to Italy to study. She calls me up, Dad, you got to see the ingredients on these products over here in Europe versus America. They don't allow that in their citizenry, but America somehow, and Kennedy's working on that, but it all relates to this. So now you're obese, so now you need semaglutide, Ozempic, because what? It's even in your food. So the government has been failing us. I think that's a thread here, especially the health institutes.
And you pointed out the food, which people are learning about these days, that America has all these extra ingredients in there that are very toxic.
Stuff.
But it's the same thing in the vaccines.
Yeah,
so we have the worst, all this extra stuff added in the American vaccines. Why?
Yeah, why? But why are we asking that question? National Institutes of Health, the bureaucracy with 20,000 plus people, right? And the Centers for Disease Control, right? Bureaucracies, and now we have to watch a video to find out that we're unprotected, and these manufacturers run willy-nilly, and just, it's got to be what? Cost. It's got to be that it's cheaper or they last longer, because it's certainly not because they're more effective. You've got these autism rates, and autism's permanent. There is no cure for it.
Yeah.
So it seems really clear to me that, and it should, I think, for anybody who's really looking, how easy, because of the way the standards have been set up and the way the system is, how easy it would be to be able to push the COVID mandates with the vaccines after they were getting away with all this stuff for years,
So
right?
Here comes a worldwide pandemic.
Yeah. So the mass injection over half of the world's population,
Right.
we're talking half of the world,
Right.
okay, is probably, or maybe, okay, the worst thing that ever happened to the history of the human species.
Or possibly the best thing, because now it raises questions, and now everyone's becoming aware of this. So sure, there was collateral damage, what's a couple vaccine deaths, but now what do we know? We know all of this, so yeah.
I mean, it's
tragic,
a
yes.
tragic. And look, if we confirm all of this, which I believe it's already confirmed, but anyway, there should be prosecutions.
Jail time.
There should be prosecutions for the people who knew what they were doing
Yes.
and did it
Fauci.
anyway.
Exactly. Let's take a look at this video so everyone can have a better perspective of what we're talking about.
The mass injecting of more than half the world's population with that drug is the worst thing that has ever happened in the history of our species, and it has happened now. And I know that's very, very difficult for a lot of people to accept, particularly people who've had it. But we are now living in the aftermath of that. And the repercussions are going to go on, I'm afraid, for a very long time. It's not like, oh, lots of people died and now they finished dying, and obviously we want justice. People will keep dying, keep being extremely ill, probably be infertile, affected in all kinds of different ways for years and years, I'm afraid. And people have to kind of accept that thing took place. And anybody who was involved at any kind of high level with making that happen is not your friend.
When the FDA asked the federal judge to delay the release until 2076, over 50 years from now, I can't
hear
live
a
that
record
long.
skip at that point. Say that again, because people thought this was a joke. This is real. It's now confirmed. They have asked.
They wanted to delay the release of the documents for 50 years. Think about that.
Consumer friendly, 50 years.
Think about it. So
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
good.
everyone's gone who cared about the issue.
Forgotten about.
Right. And they probably would have delayed another 50 years just to make sure.
But now, listen, you guys are expecting me to believe some guy on a video, right? So,
Doctor,
But here's the thing,
scientist.
people. You know who first spotted that there was something wrong with this COVID vaccine? I'm going to say it 3 times. I want you to understand this. The actuarials at the life insurance companies saw a spike immediately after the introduction of the COVID-19 Kung Flu China virus, right? They didn't see a ramp up. They saw a spike of deaths in people from 18 to 36 years old.
You mean the
It's a
vaccine?
spike. It's vaccine recipients.
Right.
So here's the actuarials who have to pay out life insurance. And what do they see? All of a sudden, boom, their payouts are going up, and they said, what the hell's going on?
Among middle-aged people.
Right, healthy group. So who's the first that spotted it? It wasn't the Centers for Disease Control. It wasn't the NIH. It wasn't anybody that we pay on the front lines to protect us. It was who? The people that have to pay out the insurance benefits for those young people that immediately spiked after receipt of the COVID vaccine. So, you know, why do I believe that guy? Because the data all points in the same direction. I didn't wait for the experts to tell me. We see it. We know it.
Well, also the hospitals were receiving bonuses, okay?
It all ties in.
If the patient had died from COVID, with COVID. So,
Right.
get this, in case you didn't know. You get into a car accident,
Right.
all right?
You're
It's
busted
bad.
up. Yeah.
It's bad, okay? And it just so happens that you broke everything.
Right.
Now you die in the hospital.
Right.
But guess what? You died with broken bones and
COVID.
Okay, they get the bonus.
They get the bonus.
You're right, yes, COVID, so
This
they were paid.
added to the number of
Right.
COVID cases,
Right.
and you're dead. So guess what? Your family. You think your family's going to want to do an autopsy? You were hit by a truck. Okay. What are they doing an autopsy about? It doesn't matter what it really says. on the death certificate, but there were whistleblowers who said, why is this on the death certificate?
This guy died of traumatic injuries and you have COVID.
Look, the bigger issue is that for many decades, we've trusted the scientists because, let's face it, the past century has had amazing new technology and cures developed and antibiotics and all of these things which are wonderful. We trusted these so-called experts, and they create these computer models about climate change or so-called climate or this issue, and we've trusted them, and we have to stop trusting them.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's a shame. And the amount of money that we've poured into these organizations to protect us, and now we're finding out 100 days into a Trump administration that a lot of this has been lies. Wow, no wonder they fought so hard against anybody that's going to expose them, whether it was Kennedy or Trump or anybody else. So,
and the studies are out there. Richard, I know you have a study that you'd like to discuss. And
this is from Cheryl Atkinson.
Yes.
She's done a lot of great reporting on these issues. Study shows nearly half of COVID deaths not caused by the virus.
Amazing.
Journalist Cheryl Atkinson shared a study on COVID-19 deaths. Things are not as they seem. Conservative skeptics were calling for an audit into COVID deaths from the very beginning, certain that things weren't quite adding up. It was an unpopular position at the time, as the rest of the world was still reeling from the fear and uncertainty of a global pandemic. Now that we're several years removed, people are finally looking into exactly how COVID deaths were categorized in Greece.
So, talking about Greece, Richard, my first cousin had a health issue where he had to wear an oxygen tank. And during COVID, his numbers were dropping. He calls his doctor, and this was in Athens, and says, I'm having issues with my oxygen levels. He goes, you need to go to the hospital. You can't come here. It's not going to happen. Go to the hospital. And my cousin, was very open-minded and didn't want to take the vaccine. I'm just going to say it straight out, okay? Well, he went to the hospital because his doctor told him you really need to go. And last thing he did was speak to his sister, my cousin, and said, I got to go. They're telling me to go. And she goes, be careful. Can I come with you? And they're like, they're not going to let you in. And that was the last that she ever spoke to my cousin, because to this day, we don't know what happened when he walked into that Greek hospital, because you don't have someone who's advocating for you. And we don't know if they forced him to take the vaccine
remdesivir vaccine,
with him being
intubation,
so immune compromised. But all we knew was that they told us that he had died. So it's been a mystery since then during COVID, and I wonder how many people had lost their loved ones like that in that type of situation.
Another statistic,
it's heartbreaking.
Right? He's just another number. Tragic.
Okay, just to read the conclusion of the study that she talks about. The vast majority, 95.6% of our patient population had at least one comorbidity. After reviewing the death certificates, medical charts, and interviewing the attending physicians, we concluded that in 240, which is 45.3% of the 530 reviewed cases, COVID-19 was not related to the death. In 133, or 25% of the cases, COVID-19 was determined to be the direct cause of death, while in 157, or 30% of the cases, COVID-19 was not the primary cause, but contributed to the chain of events leading to the death. So there are a lot of games being played with the causes of the deaths, and in many cases there is money involved and bonuses too.
You're having a heart attack.
Right.
The ambulance comes and takes you.
Right.
You go in, you die. Guess what? You died with a heart attack and COVID.
Yep.
Right.
Well, now that it's just being reported, where were these reports before with the lying, racketeering, collusional, conspiratorial media. Like, they're still not reporting on this. Yet Cheryl Atkinson, who was spied on by the FBI and the CIA because she was a former Fox News reporter, now she's bringing it out. So is she the only one in the media that's exposing this or even questioning it?
And
of course she is.
She had to go independent.
She had to go independent.
Which, look, I'm very happy that President Trump is allowing not just legacy journalists into the press
media
conferences.
Room, yes.
It's a game changer.
But independent journalists who are not on the pay of Pfizer Corporation or Moderna, who can ask
or
questions.
ABC, NBC, PBS, NBC, MSLSD. Yeah, that legacy media is just about done.
So I'm glad that you bring that up, Richard, because there was one doctor in New York, and this happened to have been my children's pediatrician. And this pediatrician, which I used to drive over an hour to get to, is world renowned. And he has done over 30 years of research when it comes to vaccines. And he was not a anti-vaxxer. But what happened was during the period where, after 1986, he started seeing these escalations.
Which in 1986 is when they passed a law giving immunity to the
vaccine
pharmaceutical companies for vaccines.
That's correct.
Signed by, unfortunately, Ronald Reagan.
Yes, which I believe he didn't know what that was about. I feel that he was hoodwinked into it as a way of trying to save humanity, which was the exact opposite. And we see that from the left. Everything they say, it's the exact opposite. The gig's up. Sorry, Frank. So one of the things, his name is Dr. Larry Palevsky, and he is world renowned. And I have a video to share with you guys because he has reported to Congress, he's reported to many different bodies, government bodies or agencies on these issues because he has 30 years of research. Let's take a look at one of his reports that has to do with inflammation from vaccines that brings on chronic illness.
To the vaccines that we're giving. So we have never studied whether the aluminum that we're giving in vaccines gets into the brain, and we've never measured whether it stays in the brain and what it does if it does stay in the brain. But we do know that vaccines are supposed to cause inflammation in the body. But we have more than half of our children with chronic inflamed conditions, and we've never allowed ourselves to ask the question, if the vaccines cause inflammation acutely, do they continue to create inflammation chronically? We have 1 in 5 with neurodevelopmental disabilities, 1 in 10 with ADD and ADHD, 1 in 35 with autism, 1 in 11 with asthma, and 1 in 20 under the age of 5 with seizures. And the autoimmune diseases are exponentially rising, and we are finding that the viruses and the bacteria that we're injecting into the body, along with the adjuvants, create something called molecular mimicry, which means the body sees those viruses thinking that it's foreign, but actually finds pieces of those viruses that match pieces of the self. And the immune system doesn't differentiate between what it's been told to reject and itself. So it will turn the immune system on itself, leading to an autoimmune condition. We know this about hepatitis B, we know it about the Gardasil vaccine, and we know it about the flu vaccine. And we continue to say unequivocally that the vaccines have been studied effectively and that they're safe, and that's just not true.
Yeah, that's my kid's pediatrician. He was the best. He still is the best. If you live near New York, you should go see him.
So he's actually was your guy.
Yeah.
He was my guy in Huntington, Long Island, and he also would travel to Albany, to the Capitol with us and meet with legislators, along with a lot of other famous people, including RFK Jr., because we did put up a really strong fight, and I wish that people would know, really understand what we gave up and how hard we fought with science in our hands. And we were called anti-vaxxers, and we were called a whole bunch of other things. And it's not the way it's supposed to be. The government is supposed to be working for us. There should be accountability. We should be able to trust our doctors who know us. There's a sacred relationship, should be, between the doctor, the patient, the child, and the parent.
Tell them when that video was from.
That was from 2020. And I have to tell you, those numbers are actually worse now. So if you're in shock, you're going to be in more shock when you actually see them updated.
I'm in shock. This program, what we bring to you today, is one of the absolute groundbreaking that I've ever seen with this compilation of data. It's like, so like I said before, implicit trust. You go to your doctor, he says you need an operation, you're doing it. Now you have to question to the simple shot that we have bureaucracies set up for and paid for. They've sold us down the river.
Okay, but there's something we have to look at, which is to realize
Jail.
that we've been controlled
Absolutely.
through smear tactics and propaganda.
Lying, racketeering, collusional media.
Anastasia and other parents went there.
Yep.
You were labeled, you're an anti-vaxxer.
The
You're
mindset.
Crazy mother.
Crazy mother.
Herd mentality.
Right? And we've been controlled. And you can see this another example is, I would say it's probably at least 70% of the American public supported the COVID lockdowns. They re-elected the governors in Illinois,
That proves it,
California, and New York State who pushed these lockdowns, which destroyed
businesses, families, lives,
careers,
took the vax,
marriages, right? And they were reelected with all this overwhelming support.
Right, the people that were locked down and forced to be injected.
Listen, that's ugly enough, but there's something deeper there that we have to ask ourselves. Yeah, we're going down that rabbit hole. We have to. Okay, we see, for example, in education, what's been happening. You were a former school board president. They keep lowering the standards.
Right.
They lower the standards so they don't show
then it's okay.
that the population of the next generation is not learning. So they lower the standards to say, hey, they're doing great because they're reaching these thresholds which have been lowered.
Right.
Well, guess what?
It's
also happening in researching childhood development. So when you bring your child in, let's say when it's born, it does a sensory exam.
Right.
You know how it kicks if you touch it here, how it reacts and all that fun stuff, and it's a test they have to pass. Well, guess what? There are thresholds that they have to reach through every age. So at 6 months, you should be able to do this. At 1 year, your child should be able to. And if they're not, they may be delayed. And now you have to ask, well, why is my child being delayed? And they don't want you asking that question. So here is Dr. Pilevsky again. And I got to tell you, his research is second to none. And you may be even more shocked from what you hear right now.
Hi, everybody. My name is Larry Pilevsky. I'm a pediatrician in New York State. And I'm here at the MAPS conference in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And there are a great number of newcomers to the conference who are very interested in taking care of children who have special needs. I had the pleasure of giving a lecture at the conference this week on child development before we lowered the bar. And I don't know if everybody knows, but somehow in December 2023, pediatricians and the CDC decided that child development was no longer the same as it was when I was taught in medical school in the 1980s. And you see, the problem is that over the last 30 to 40 years, there have been a great increase in developmentally delayed children. And the system that we work in decided that we're going to lower the bar. We're going to make more children normal, even though they are now delayed compared to the development that I was taught in medical school and residency. And if anyone really wants to take a look at it, many of the delays that children have are 3, even 6, or even 12 months later from what is really normal development. So just as an example, children are supposed to walk about 12 months, maybe 13 months at most. The CDC now says children should walk at 18 months, and that's normal. And children are supposed to transfer objects from one hand to the other about 6 months. CDC says, no, it's normal at 9 months. And children are supposed to creep on their belly, army crawl, about 7 months. The CDC says creeping is not important anymore for developmental milestones. And children are supposed to crawl about 8 or 9 months. And the CDC says, no, crawling is not important for child developmental milestones either. And then it gets really difficult when you start looking at the language development. Because in the pediatric textbooks from the 1980s and 90s, what does it say about child development? At about 21 months old, 50% of children should have at least 50 words. Nowadays, the CDC is saying 30 months is when children are supposed to have 50 words. And so what we're seeing is an acceptance of children who are mild to severely developmentally delayed, who are being called normal. But they're not normally developed. They are normally accepted as developed. And I think it behooves us in the medical field to go back to what's old and recreate it as new, because we are missing many children who have motor delays and speech delays, both expressive and receptive delays, and they are getting lost in the system because doctors are now saying, according to the CDC, your child is normal. And mothers and fathers and grandparents are knowing that those milestones that the CDC are saying are normal are not normal. And we need to do better by our kids and not let them slip through the cracks and go back to the real development from when I was taught in medical school. My big question to the audience when I gave this lecture was, did somehow the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics figure out that all of the developmental milestones that we knew 40, 50, and 60 years ago were suddenly wrong, and they figured out that these are the correct milestones? I ask you to really think about it. Thank you.
And just to be clear, so that the audience knows,
Right.
MAPS stands for Medical Academy of Pediatrics and Special Needs. And why MAPS is so important is because this program, Medical Society, has been growing because of the mass amounts of populations that have been growing from this.
Of special needs kids you're talking about.
Yes.
Right, and the answer to his question is obviously no. The CDC didn't do new studies and suddenly discovered that the normal development was outdated. They had other incentives.
So, I just have to coin a new phrase here. It's the lying, racketeering, conspiratorial, collusional, right, acting together, medical society. Because now, just like the actuarials at the insurance companies that had to pay out for the COVID vax deaths, now what's happening? They're changing, right, the parameters, how they measure everything to fit the causes of these vaccines that we're giving to these children. So now we see the results, right? And what we're saying is, okay, you can't have them at this level now. We have to lower, like you said, that bar. So that... And why is there only one guy saying it? And why isn't that on the CBS Evening News or CNN?
Well, they're doing the same thing with education.
They're
lowering
right.
because so many, like New York City, for example, because so many children cannot perform at grade level, they've changed the tests so that more of them hopefully will pass the fake test.
So the question is, right, who wants more of the less Americans that are going to be mentally challenged and disabled? Like, there has to be something that in the big scheme of things, why is this being allowed to happen when we pay the CDC and the NIH billions of dollars and they have all these doctors? Like, what could possibly be going on?
I just want to go back to education for a second, because I spoke to a friend of mine who is a 5th grade teacher in New York, okay? And what she said to me was that 5th grade studies have changed so much because they're covering 3rd grade work.
Really?
That's wonderful.
It's disgusting, and there should be whistleblowers everywhere. There are a lot of people who left education because of the frustration.
Right.
Okay? People who left, and endearing people who worked with special needs students, and I know in New York, who actually left the programs because they were not there to really, they were told this is not what you do, and they were so frustrated that they would leave the field.
Right.
So you have a lot of good people who leave. Well, who's teaching these children? Are they learning? And we're not even talking about the special needs kids. We're talking about all the kids.
Right, exactly.
You know, so why is that happening? And think about it. If you don't have a matrix to be able to decipher
Right.
is something going wrong, then can you really prove it? It's like, I'm an engineer. I'm going to build this building. Guess what? There's no ruler. How do I know if that window fits in
Right.
there? Let's take a guess. I feel it's not going to fit in, but that means nothing. Okay?
Well, maybe, I mean, you feel like it's the right size. I mean,
Well, you know what? Here's
And then the
thing.
building goes down.
There's from today's show, you're going to find that there's no longer any coincidences. These are not all coincidental because you're seeing that they're moving the bar to change for everything that they put into play for 40, 50, 60 years. So there's a lot of conspiracies perpetrated on the American public.
and this another reason to distract the American public with irrelevant issues
Hate Trump.
like DEI,
DEI.
racial issues, transgender issues. All these
Right.
issues are distracting people from what I would consider to be, look, I'm sure that every parent, black, white, Asian, or whatever, wants their child to be healthy and learn something in school. It's not that complicated.
Yeah, that's why they fought so hard against MAHA and MAGA, because in the end, every American will benefit from it. So, yeah.
Do your own research. The reason why they attack our kids is not just for depopulation. It's because they know that the adults are working and they entrust in a system their children, like the schools.
Right.
So do your own research. We'll see you next time. But before we do that,
Going to do some praying.
we have to. This is a big one. Richard, take it away.
Okay, Psalm 103, verses 2 through 4. Praise the Lord, my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgives all your sins and heals all your diseases, who redeems your life from the pit and crowns you with love and compassion.
And that's it in a nutshell. Boy, the Bible has so many words of
Still
wisdom.
relevant today.
It is. It's ageless, the #1 best-selling book. And Frank, I know that you have with us something a little special for everyone to hear
Yep,
about.
we're going to watch, to close us out, The Sad Little Man by 5 Times August. So until we see you again, make America healthy, make America great, God bless America, and just watch out for those jabs.
Sad little man sitting deep in a lie. He's dead in his soul, but he'll keep you alive. Do what he says, not what he do, 'cause the truth is for him and the lie is for you. Sad little man, but he's treated like a god as the faithless prey to a fake and a fraud. Worship the man, pledge to his word. 1 shot, 2 shot, now you get a third. Sad little man, you better run now while you know you can. Sad little man, you don't fool me, you sad little man. Sad little man, gonna trap you like a dog, put your head in the net while they eat you raw. Don't ask why, just comply, 'cause fear is the drug that the doc prescribe. Sad little man, you can watch him on the news, preaching to his choir while they learn the rules. Some feel safe and some feel healed, but they'll all hold his hand as he makes the kill. Sad little man, you better run now while you know you can. Sad little man, you don't fool me, you sad little man. Sad little man, and he wants your kids. Some might live while the rest get sick, so put them to the test. test and listen for the yell. When the truth comes out, he's gonna burn in hell. Sad little man, you better run now.